After 5 years on business in Italy, I returned to get my motherless granddaughter. Every month, I sent $10,000 for her support. But when I arrived at her home, I saw her scrubbing the floor with a rag. Her arms were thin and bruised, and she wore a name tag that read, "Family MAID," while her new stepmother's lover filed her nails. My blood boiled. But what I did next? I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Marcy, and I'm 62 years old. After 5 years managing family business in Italy, I thought I was coming home to embrace my granddaughter and start fresh. Instead, I walked into a nightmare that still makes my hands shake when I think about it. The flight from Rome to Atlanta felt endless. My mind kept drifting to Cora, my sweet granddaughter who was only 7 when I left. She'd be 12 now, probably taller, maybe with her mother's same bright smile. Sarah had died in that car accident when Cora was just 5, leaving my son Derek devastated and me as the only stable family the little girl had left. When Derek remarried Regina 2 years ago, I felt relief. Finally, Cora would have a mother figure again. Someone to braid her hair, help with homework, give her the feminine guidance I couldn't provide from across the ocean. Derek sounded so happy on our monthly calls, always talking about how Regina was wonderful with Cora, how they were becoming a real family. Every month without fail, I transferred $10,000 to Derek's account specifically for Cora's care, education, clothes, activities, whatever she needed. In 5 years, that was $600,000. I trusted my son completely. Why wouldn't I? He was Cora's father. The taxi pulled up to the house on Maple Street, and I felt that familiar warmth seeing the 2-story colonial where Cora lived. Derek had inherited it from his wife Sarah, and I'd been sending extra money for maintenance and improvements. The lawn looked immaculate, and I noticed a new BMW in the driveway next to Derek's truck. Regina must have gotten herself something nice. I rang the doorbell, my heart hammering with anticipation. I couldn't wait to see how tall Cora had gotten, to hear about school, her friends, her interests. 5 years is a lifetime when you're a child. Regina answered the door, and I was struck by how different she looked. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her nails professionally done, and she wore an expensive-looking silk blouse. She looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. "Marcy!" she exclaimed, but something about her smile seemed forced. "You're early. We weren't expecting you until tomorrow." "I caught an earlier flight," I said, looking past her into the house. "Where's Cora? I can't wait to see her." Regina's expression flickered for just a moment. "Oh, she's around somewhere. Come in, come in." I followed her into the living room, and my breath caught. The space had been completely transformed. Gone was Sarah's warm, lived-in furniture, replaced by sleek modern pieces that looked like they belonged in a showroom. Crystal vases, expensive artwork, a massive flat-screen television. Everything screamed money. "Wow, Regina, you've really made this place your own," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Thank you. I believe in creating a sophisticated environment. It's important for a child's development." That's when I heard it. The sound of scrubbing coming from the kitchen. Regina's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Let me get you some coffee," she said quickly, moving toward the kitchen doorway. "Why don't you sit down and—" But I was already following the sound. Nothing could have prepared me for what I saw. Cora was on her hands and knees on the kitchen floor, scrubbing with a dirty rag. My beautiful granddaughter, who should have been in school or playing with friends, was cleaning the floor like a servant. She wore clothes that were too small, faded and worn, her dark hair hanging limp around her face. What made my blood run cold was the plastic name tag pinned to her shirt. In bold black letters, it read, "Family MAID." "Cora?" I whispered. She looked up, and I saw my heart break in real time. This wasn't the vibrant little girl I remembered. Her arms were thin, too thin, and I could see what looked like bruises on her wrists. Her eyes had lost that bright spark, replaced by something that looked almost like fear. "Grandma Marcy?" Her voice was barely audible. I knelt beside her, wanting to pull her into my arms, but Regina's sharp voice cut through the moment. "Cora, you're not finished with your chores, and you know better than to stop working when we have company." The casual cruelty in her tone made my stomach turn. I looked up at Regina, then noticed someone else lounging at the breakfast bar. A man I didn't recognize, probably in his 30s, was filing his nails while watching the scene with obvious amusement. "This is Marcus," Regina said smoothly. "He's staying with us for a while." Marcus smirked at me. "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Chen. Regina's told me all about you." His eyes flicked to Cora, scrubbing the floor. "Love what you've done with the place. Very efficient household management." I felt like I was going to be sick. "Cora, sweetheart, why aren't you in school?" Regina answered before Cora could speak. "She's been having some behavioral issues. Homeschooling is more appropriate right now." Behavioral issues? I looked at this child who was scrubbing a floor that already looked spotless. "What kind of behavioral issues?" "She's been very difficult lately. Ungrateful. Defiant. Sometimes children need structure to learn respect." I watched as Cora flinched at the word defiant. This wasn't structure. This was something else entirely. "Cora, baby, come here and give your grandmother a hug." "She needs to finish her work first," Regina said firmly. "Cora understands that chores come before socializing. Don't you, Cora?" My granddaughter nodded silently, not meeting my eyes. The name tag on her chest caught the light, and I felt rage building in my chest like a physical thing. "Where's Derek?" I asked, my voice carefully controlled. "He's at work. He'll be home around 6. Regina checked an expensive watch on her wrist. "He's been working very hard lately. We've had some additional expenses." "I bet you have," I thought, looking around at the expensive renovations. Regina's designer clothes, the new car outside. "Marcus, honey, why don't you show Marcy the improvements we've made to the house?" Regina suggested. "I'll make sure Cora gets back to her duties." As Marcus led me through room after room of expensive upgrades, my mind was reeling. Where was the $10,000 a month I'd been sending? Every room had been professionally decorated, new furniture, new fixtures. The master bedroom had a walk-in closet full of designer clothes and shoes that could have fed a family for months. "Regina has excellent taste," Marcus was saying. "She really knows how to make a house into a home." I nodded absently, but all I could think about was Cora on that kitchen floor, wearing a name tag that labeled her as a servant in her own home. When we returned to the living room, Cora was nowhere to be seen. "Where is she?" I asked. "Cleaning the bathrooms upstairs?" Regina replied casually, settling onto the expensive sofa. "She has a full schedule of responsibilities. It keeps her busy and out of trouble." "She's 12 years old. Almost 13, actually. Old enough to contribute to the household. I believe in teaching children the value of hard work." I stared at this woman who was supposed to be caring for my granddaughter with my money, who was treating her like unpaid help while living in luxury. The rage I felt was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. "I'd like to see her room," I said. Something flickered in Regina's eyes. "Of course. Though I should warn you, we've had to make some adjustments to her living situation due to her behavior." She led me upstairs to what used to be Sarah's craft room, a small space at the end of the hall. Inside was a narrow twin bed, a small dresser and nothing else. No decorations, no personal items, no signs that a child lived here. "This is where Cora sleeps?" "She's more comfortable with less stimulation. Too many possessions can be overwhelming for a child with her particular needs." "What needs?" Regina's smile was cold. "Cora has always been a challenging child, Marcy. Sarah spoiled her terribly before she died. We're helping her develop better habits." I thought about the money I'd been sending. $600,000 over 5 years. Money that was supposed to give Cora everything she needed, not pay for Regina's lifestyle while my granddaughter lived like Cinderella. "I think I'll wait for Derek to get home," I said, my voice tight with controlled anger. "Of course, though I should mention that Derek has been very supportive of our approach with Cora. He understands that sometimes tough love is necessary." As I sat in that expensively decorated living room, listening to the sounds of my 12-year-old granddaughter scrubbing bathrooms somewhere upstairs, I realized that coming home after 5 years had revealed something far worse than I'd ever imagined. The little girl I'd been supporting from across the ocean wasn't living the comfortable life I'd envisioned. She was living as a prisoner in her own home, while the woman who was supposed to protect her lived like a queen on my money. But Regina had made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated exactly what a grandmother would do when she discovered her granddaughter was being treated like a slave. The war was just beginning, and Regina had no idea who she was really fighting. Derek finally came home at 6:30, and the moment he walked through the door, I knew something was terribly wrong. My son, who used to be strong and confident, looked like a shadow of himself. His shoulders were slumped, his eyes avoiding mine, and when he hugged me, it felt hollow. "Mom, you look great," he said, but even his voice sounded different. Smaller somehow. "Thank you, honey. We need to talk." Regina appeared almost instantly, sliding up next to Derek and taking his arm possessively. "Derek's had such a long day at work. Maybe you two can catch up tomorrow?" "No," I said firmly. "We need to talk now." Derek glanced nervously between Regina and me. "Sure, Mom. What's on your mind?" I looked pointedly at Regina and Marcus, who was still lounging around like he owned the place. Privately. "Oh, we don't keep secrets in this family," Regina said with that fake smile. "We're all adults here." "Regina, please," Derek said quietly. It was clearly an old argument. She huffed dramatically but retreated to the kitchen with Marcus, though I had no doubt she was listening to every word. Derek and I sat in his living room, surrounded by all the expensive things my money had apparently bought, and I struggled to find the right words. "Derek, I need to understand what's happening with Cora." His face immediately became guarded. "What do you mean?" "I mean, why is my granddaughter wearing a name tag that says Family Maid and scrubbing floors while your wife wears designer clothes?" Derek's jaw tightened. "Mom, you don't understand the situation. Cora's been having problems." "What kind of problems?" He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I remembered from when he was a stressed teenager. "She's been acting out, disrespectful. Regina's been trying to help her learn responsibility by making her clean the house like a servant. It's not like that." But he wouldn't meet my eyes. "Then what is it like?" "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like the 12-year-old daughter is doing all the housework while the adults live in luxury." Derek's voice became defensive. "Regina works very hard to keep this household running. Cora needs to learn that she's part of a family, not the center of the universe like Sarah used to treat her." The way he talked about his late wife, Cora's mother, made my skin crawl. Sarah treated her like a beloved daughter, because that's what she was. Sarah spoiled her rotten. Cora never learned boundaries, never learned respect. Since Regina came into our lives, we've been trying to fix that. I stared at my son, wondering when he'd become this stranger. Fix what exactly? She's a child, Derek. She's supposed to be in school, playing with friends, not scrubbing your floors. She is in school. Regina homeschools her. And where exactly does this homeschooling happen? Derek hesitated. Regina has a structured program. I haven't seen any books, any school materials, any indication that learning is happening in this house. From the kitchen came the sound of Regina's laughter, sharp and artificial. Derek glanced toward the sound nervously. "Derek, I've been sending you $10,000 every month for 5 years. Where has that money gone?" "It goes toward Cora's care, just like we agreed." "Her care?" I gestured around the opulent living room. "This furniture costs more than most people make in a year. That car outside, Regina's clothes, this whole renovation, that's where my money went, isn't it?" "Mom, maintaining a home is expensive." "Don't lie to me." My voice was sharper than I intended. "I've sent you $600,000 to take care of Cora, and I find her living like a servant while everyone else lives like royalty." Derek stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. "You don't understand how hard this has been. Raising someone else's daughter, dealing with her behavioral issues, trying to blend a family. Regina gave up her career to be a mother to Cora." "Whose daughter?" The words came out like ice. "Derek, Cora is your daughter. Sarah was your wife." "Sarah's gone!" The words exploded out of him, raw and painful. "She's been gone for 7 years, Mom. Regina is here now. Regina is my wife, and she's trying to help Cora become a productive member of this family instead of a spoiled brat who thinks the world owes her something." I felt like I'd been slapped. A spoiled brat? Derek. She was 7 years old when I left. What could she possibly have done that justified treating her like this? Before Derek could answer, Regina appeared in the doorway with Marcus right behind her. I couldn't help but overhear, she said, though she didn't look the least bit apologetic. Marcy, I think there's been some misunderstanding about Cora's situation. Really? Then please, enlighten me. Regina settled gracefully into the chair across from me, every movement calculated. Cora has some serious behavioral problems that developed after Sarah died. She became destructive, disrespectful, violent even. She would throw screaming fits, break things, hit other children at school. I looked at Derek. Is this true? He nodded reluctantly. She was acting out pretty badly. The school called us multiple times. She was grieving, I said. She lost her mother. Of course she was acting out. For 7 years? Regina's voice was smooth as silk. Marcy, I know this is hard to hear, but Cora has never adjusted properly to her mother's death. She became manipulative, using her grief to get out of responsibilities. She would lie constantly, steal things, even hurt herself to get attention. My heart was pounding. None of this sounded like the sweet little girl I remembered. I don't believe you. Regina pulled out her phone and scrolled through it. Here, look at these pictures. She showed me photos of broken dishes, torn books, what looked like marker scribbled on walls. This is just from last month, and here, she scrolled to more photos. These are the bruises she gave me when I tried to take away her phone for misbehaving. The photos showed Regina's arms with what looked like finger marks and scratches. She did this? She has serious anger issues, Regina said sadly. We've had to be very firm with her boundaries. The chores aren't punishment, they're therapy. Structure helps her feel secure and teaches her that actions have consequences. I felt like the ground was shifting under me. Could I have been wrong? Could the child I saw scrubbing floors actually be a troubled teenager who needed this kind of strict discipline? The name tag, I said weakly. That was her idea, Regina said. She said she wanted to contribute to the family, so we gave her responsibilities that matched her ability level. She actually takes pride in keeping the house clean. Derek nodded. Mom, I know it looks harsh from the outside, but Regina has really helped Cora improve. She's much calmer now, more respectful. What about school? Her education? I'm certified in early childhood education, Regina said smoothly. Cora learns much better in a controlled environment than she did in public school, where she was constantly getting into fights and disrupting other children's learning. I sat there trying to process all of this information. It contradicted everything I thought I knew, everything my instincts were telling me. But Regina sounded so convincing, and Derek was backing up everything she said. I'd like to talk to Cora, I said finally. Of course, but I should warn you. She's learned to manipulate adults by playing the victim. She might tell you stories designed to make you feel sorry for her. Regina called upstairs. Cora, come down here, please. My granddaughter appeared at the top of the stairs, moving slowly and carefully. She'd changed clothes but still looked thin and tired. Yes, ma'am? Ma'am. She called Regina ma'am. Your grandmother wants to talk with you. Cora came down and perched on the edge of the sofa, hands folded in her lap, eyes down. Everything about her body language screamed caution. Cora, sweetheart, how are you doing? I asked gently. She glanced quickly at Regina before answering. I'm fine, Grandma Marcy. Are you happy here? Another quick glance at Regina. Yes, ma'am. Tell your grandmother about your chores, Regina prompted. I help keep the house clean, Cora said in a flat voice. Regina says it's important to contribute to the family. And do you like homeschooling? Yes, ma'am. I'm learning a lot. Every answer was what Regina wanted to hear, delivered in a voice devoid of any real emotion. This wasn't the spirited child I remembered, but then again, she'd been through a lot. Maybe she really had become someone I didn't recognize. Cora, why don't you show your grandmother your room? Regina suggested. We went upstairs to the sparse little space I'd seen earlier. Cora stood in the doorway while I looked around. This is nice, I lied, trying to get some reaction from her. Yes, ma'am. Regina says too much stuff makes it hard to focus. What do you do for fun? For just a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Then it was gone. I read sometimes. Regina picks out appropriate books for me. I noticed there were no books visible in the room. As we headed back downstairs, I heard Regina talking to Derek in urgent, low tones. They stopped when they saw us. "Well," Regina said brightly, "I hope that helped clear things up." I looked at Cora, who immediately went back to that careful, watchful posture. Everything Regina had told me made logical sense. The photos, Derek's confirmation. Even Cora's own responses seemed to support this narrative of a troubled child who needed strict boundaries. But every instinct I had was screaming that something was wrong. After Cora was sent back upstairs, Regina walked me to the door. "I know this is a lot to take in," she said sympathetically, "but I want you to know that everything we do is for Cora's benefit. Derek and I both love her very much." I nodded, my head spinning with confusion and doubt. As I drove to my hotel, I kept thinking about the name tag, about Cora's thin arms, about the way she flinched when Regina spoke sharply. But I also thought about the photos Regina had shown me, about Derek's obvious stress, about how convincing their story had been. By the time I reached my hotel room, I had made a decision. I needed to know the truth, and I wasn't going to get it by asking questions they were prepared to answer. I was going to have to find it myself. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Cora's thin face, the way she flinched when Regina spoke, the careful way she held herself like she was afraid of taking up too much space. Something was wrong, and I was going to find out what. The next morning, I drove to the local library and spent 3 hours researching Regina Walsh before she became Regina Chen. What I found made my blood run cold. Regina had been married twice before Derek. Her first husband, Robert Walsh, had died in a car accident, leaving behind a 9-year-old daughter named Emma. 6 months after the funeral, Regina married Thomas Brennan, a widower with a 10-year-old son named Jake. I found a newspaper article from 2 years later about Emma Walsh going missing from her home. She was found 3 days later at a truck stop 50 miles away, malnourished and traumatized. When questioned, she told authorities that her stepmother had been making her sleep in the garage and work as household help for paying guests. The case was quietly settled out of court. Regina and Thomas divorced shortly after, and she received a substantial settlement. There was no mention of what happened to Emma or Jake. My hands were shaking as I printed the articles. This woman had a pattern, and Cora was just her latest victim. I spent the rest of the day creating a plan. I couldn't just march into their house and demand answers. Regina had already shown me how good she was at manipulation, how she could make her story sound completely reasonable. I needed evidence, real proof of what was happening. First, I called an old friend from my business days, Patricia, who worked for a private investigation firm. "Marcy, good to hear from you," she said warmly. "How's retirement treating you?" "I need a favor, Pat. A big one." I explained the situation, and Patricia's voice became deadly serious. "Jesus, Marcy, this sounds like a classic exploitation case. What do you need?" "Surveillance equipment. Something small, undetectable. I need to document what's really happening in that house. I can have someone meet you this afternoon, but Marcy, be careful. If this woman is as dangerous as she sounds, you could be putting yourself and your granddaughter at risk." 2 hours later, I met Patricia's colleague, a woman named Lisa, at a coffee shop downtown. She showed me tiny recording devices, cameras small enough to hide in everyday objects, and taught me how to use them. "The key is to act natural," Lisa explained. "Don't change your behavior patterns or they'll get suspicious. Document everything, but don't confront them until you have enough evidence to take to authorities." That evening, I returned to Derek's house with a small overnight bag and a story about wanting to spend more time getting to know the family. "Of course you can stay," Regina said, though I caught the flash of irritation in her eyes. "We have a lovely guest room." The guest room was directly above the kitchen, which turned out to be perfect for my purposes. Over the next 3 days, I documented everything. I watched through the tiny camera I'd hidden in the living room as Regina made Cora scrub the floors again, even though they were already spotless. When Cora missed a spot, Regina made her start over from the beginning. I recorded audio of Regina telling Cora that she was worthless, just like her dead mother, when the girl accidentally dropped a dish. I documented Regina forcing Cora to stand in the corner for 2 hours because she'd asked for a glass of water during work time. But the worst discovery came on my 3rd night there. I'd placed a small recording device in the kitchen, hidden inside what looked like a decorative magnet on the refrigerator. Around midnight, I heard voices and crept to the top of the stairs to listen. Regina was on the phone with someone, her voice low but carrying clearly in the quiet house. "No, she's too young for that kind of work," Regina was saying. "But she's perfect for daytime cleaning jobs. Very obedient, won't cause any trouble. $50 an hour, minimum 4-hour bookings." My heart stopped. She was talking about Cora. "The Chen family has excellent references," Regina continued. "The child is well-trained and discreet. Your friends won't have any complaints." I gripped the stair railing so hard my knuckles went white. Regina wasn't just making Cora work as a servant in her own home. She was lending her out to other people. The conversation continued for another 10 minutes, with Regina discussing scheduling and rates like she was running a business. A business using my 12-year-old granddaughter as unpaid labor. I managed to record the entire conversation. The next morning at breakfast, I watched Regina interact with Cora with new eyes. Every order, every criticism, every casual cruelty was designed to break down a child's spirit and make her completely compliant. "Cora, you left water spots on the glasses," Regina said, examining a perfectly clean glass under the light. "Do them all again." Cora nodded without protest and began rewashing every glass in the cabinet. "Regina," I said carefully, "maybe I could help Cora with the dishes? Spend some grandmother-granddaughter time together?" "Oh, that's sweet of you, but Cora needs to learn responsibility. If we help her with her chores, she'll never develop a proper work ethic." Derek nodded in agreement. "Regina's right, Mom." Cora's come so far with her behavior since Regina started the structure program. Structure program. They'd given their abuse a name to make it sound legitimate. That afternoon, while Regina was out getting her nails done and Derek was at work, I finally had a chance to talk to Cora alone. I found her in the laundry room, folding clothes with practiced efficiency. "Cora, sweetheart, can we talk?" She looked around nervously. "I'm supposed to finish the laundry before Regina gets back." "I'll help you finish. We can talk while we work." For a few minutes, we folded clothes in silence. Then I said quietly, "Cora, I want you to know that you can tell me anything. I'm your grandmother, and I love you no matter what." Her hands stilled on a towel. "Regina says you might try to fill my head with nonsense, that some adults lie to children to make them misbehave. What do you think?" "Do you think I would lie to you?" She looked at me with those 2 old eyes. "I don't know anymore. Regina says lots of things about what people really think about me." "What kind of things?" Cora glanced toward the door again. "She says everyone knows I'm the kind of kid who causes trouble. That's why I can't go to regular school anymore. The teachers complained about me too much." "Cora, do you remember your mother? Do you remember how she treated you?" Something flickered in her face. A brief moment of real emotion before the careful mask slipped back into place. "Regina says I remember wrong. That Mommy was sick and that's why she let me get away with being bad all the time. What do you remember?" "I remember." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I remember Mommy reading to me, and making pancakes on Saturday mornings, and singing when she brushed my hair." Tears started sliding down her cheeks, and she quickly wiped them away. "Regina says crying is manipulation. That I use tears to try to get out of my responsibilities." I knelt down in front of her, my heart breaking. "Cora, crying is normal. It's okay to miss your mother. It's okay to be sad." "No, it's not." The words burst out of her. "I have to be grateful. Regina gave up everything to be my mother when nobody else wanted me. She says I should be thankful she didn't send me to live with strangers." "Honey, I would have taken you in a heartbeat. I wanted you to come live with me, but your father said you were better off with him and Regina." Cora stared at me. "You wanted me?" "Of course I wanted you. You're my granddaughter. I love you." For a moment, the careful mask completely cracked, and I saw the frightened, grieving child underneath. But then we heard a car door slam outside, and Cora immediately went rigid. "Regina's back," she whispered. "I have to finish the laundry. Cora, listen to me. This isn't normal. Children aren't supposed to work like servants. They're supposed to go to school and play and have friends." "You don't understand," she said desperately. "I'm not like other kids. I'm broken. Regina's trying to fix me, but it's really hard because I'm so damaged." "You are not broken," I said firmly. "You are not damaged. You are a beautiful, intelligent, wonderful child who deserves to be loved and protected." The front door opened, and we heard Regina's voice calling out, "I'm home! Cora, where are you?" Cora's face went pale. "If she finds out we talked like this, she'll be so angry. Please don't tell her what I said." I helped her quickly finish folding the clothes, my mind racing. This child had been so thoroughly manipulated that she believed she deserved this treatment. Regina had convinced her that love meant servitude, that she was fundamentally flawed and should be grateful for any attention at all. That night, I lay in the guest bed listening to the house settle around me and planned my next move. I had recordings now, evidence of the abuse, but I also knew that if I moved too quickly, Regina might disappear with Cora or turn Derek so completely against me that I'd never see my granddaughter again. I needed more evidence, and I needed to be smart about how I used it. The next morning, I called Patricia again from the privacy of my rental car. "I need you to dig deeper into Regina's background," I told her. "Specifically, I need to find Emma Walsh and Jake Brennan, the children from her previous marriages." "Already on it," Patricia said. "Emma Walsh is now 24 and living in Oregon. She's been in therapy for years. Jake Brennan was placed in foster care after his father's suspicious death." "Suspicious death?" "Thomas Brennan died from a fall down the stairs 6 months after Emma Walsh went missing. Jake told investigators that Regina had been medicating his father with sleeping pills, claiming he had insomnia. The insurance company settled rather than investigate further. I felt sick. This woman is a predator. Gets worse. I found records of Regina contacting several other widowers with young children in the past 2 years. She targets grieving fathers with assets and vulnerable children. I need to get Cora out of there. Marcy, you need to be careful. If this woman has killed before, you could be putting yourself in danger by staying in that house." But I couldn't leave. Not when I finally understood the scope of what was happening to my granddaughter. Regina hadn't just been stealing my money and exploiting Cora for free labor. She was systematically destroying a child's sense of self-worth, convincing her she was worthless, so she'd be easier to control. And according to those phone calls I'd recorded, she was also profiting by lending Cora out to other people as domestic help. My granddaughter wasn't just being abused, she was being trafficked. The realization hit me like a physical blow, and I had to pull over to the side of the road to catch my breath. This was so much worse than I'd imagined. But now I knew the truth, and I was going to make Regina pay for every single thing she'd done to my granddaughter. Armed with Patricia's research, I knew I needed concrete evidence of Regina's trafficking operation. The recordings I had were damning, but I needed proof that money was changing hands and that Cora was actually being sent to work for other people. I decided to extend my visit indefinitely, telling Derek and Regina that I was considering moving back to Atlanta permanently and wanted to spend time house hunting. Regina's smile was tight when I made the announcement, but she couldn't object without seeming unreasonable. "How wonderful," she said through gritted teeth. "Family is so important." Over the next week, I established a routine. Every morning, I left the house ostensibly to look at real estate listings or run errands, but instead I was conducting surveillance. I parked down the street with a clear view of the house and documented everyone who came and went. What I discovered made me physically ill. On Tuesday morning, Regina loaded Cora into her car at 7:30. I followed them to an upscale neighborhood across town, where Regina walked Cora to the front door of a massive colonial house. A well-dressed woman answered the door, handed Regina an envelope, and took Cora inside. Regina drove away, leaving my 12-year-old granddaughter alone with strangers. I sat in my car for 4 hours, watching that house, until Regina returned at noon to pick up Cora. The child who emerged looked exhausted, her clothes dirty, her hair disheveled. Regina collected another envelope before driving away. I followed them back home, my hands shaking with rage. When they arrived, Regina immediately sent Cora upstairs to shower while she counted the money from both envelopes. Through the hidden camera I'd placed in the living room, I watched her separate the bills into neat stacks. That evening at dinner, I tried to control my voice as I asked casual questions. "How was everyone's day?" "Productive," Regina replied smoothly. "Cora had some educational activities this morning." Derek nodded. Regina's always finding new learning opportunities for Cora. She's very creative with the homeschooling curriculum. Cora sat silently, picking at her small portion of food. I noticed she was served significantly less than the adults, and her plate contained only vegetables and a small piece of bread, while the rest of us had pasta and meat. "Cora's on a special diet," Regina explained when she caught me looking. "She has digestive issues that require careful monitoring." Another lie to explain away another form of neglect. The next day, I followed them again. This time, Regina took Cora to a different house, where the same exchange occurred. Envelope of money, child delivered. Regina leaves. Hours pass. Regina returns for pickup and final payment. By Friday of that week, I had documented Cora being sent to 5 different houses. Each time the pattern was the same. Regina was running a business, and my granddaughter was the commodity being sold. That weekend, I made an excuse to visit my old friend Martha, who lived an hour away. Instead, I drove to Oregon to meet Emma Walsh. I found her working at a small veterinary clinic in Portland, a quiet young woman with prematurely gray hair and nervous eyes that reminded me painfully of Cora. "You're Regina's mother-in-law?" she asked when I introduced myself. Her face went pale. "Is she still married to your son?" "Yes. Emma, I need to know what she did to you." Emma looked around the empty clinic, then locked the front door and led me to a small office in the back. "I should have spoken up years ago," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But who would have believed me? She was so good at making me sound like a troubled kid, making up stories for attention. "I believe you," I said simply. "Tell me everything." The story Emma told me was horrifyingly similar to what was happening to Cora. After her father's death, Regina had gradually isolated Emma from friends and extended family, claiming the child was too emotionally unstable for normal social interactions. She'd pulled Emma out of school for behavior problems that Emma swore never existed. "She made me work for her friends," Emma said, tears streaming down her face, "cleaning their houses, serving at their parties, taking care of their children. She told everyone I was learning life skills and that the work was therapy for my grief." "Did she make money from it?" "Thousands of dollars. She charged by the hour and kept every penny. She told me that since I was costing her so much money to raise, I needed to contribute to the household expenses." "What about your stepfather, Thomas?" Emma's face darkened. "He tried to stop her at first, but Regina was. She was very good at manipulating him. She convinced him that I was dangerous, that I needed strict control or I might hurt myself or others. She showed him fake injuries and claimed I had attacked her." "Fake injuries?" "She would hurt herself and blame me. Or she'd drug my food to make me act confused and disoriented, then tell Thomas I was having psychological episodes." I felt sick. "What happened the night you ran away?" I overheard her on the phone, talking to someone about selling me permanently. Not just lending me out for day work, but actually selling me to someone who wanted a live-in servant. She was negotiating a price. Emma wiped her eyes with shaking hands. "I knew if I didn't run that night, I'd never get another chance. I walked for 3 days before someone found me and called the police." "And your stepfather's death?" "I don't have proof, but I know she killed him. He was starting to ask questions about why I ran away, starting to doubt her story about my behavior problems. A week later, he was dead." Emma gripped my hands. "If this woman has your granddaughter, you have to get her out of there. Regina doesn't just exploit children for money. She destroys them psychologically. She makes them believe they're worthless, that they deserve abuse, that no one will ever love them." The drive back to Atlanta was the longest 4 hours of my life. I kept thinking about Cora's thin face, the way she flinched when adults spoke to her, how she believed she was broken and should be grateful for Regina's care. When I arrived back at Derek's house that evening, I found the family in the living room watching television. Cora was sitting on the floor, polishing Regina's shoes while the adults relaxed on the couch. "How was your visit with Martha?" Derek asked. "Enlightening," I said, watching Regina carefully. "Very enlightening." Something in my tone made Regina look at me sharply, but I kept my expression neutral. That night, I called Patricia with my update. "Emma's testimony combined with your recordings should be enough for the authorities," she said. "But Marcy, you need to be extremely careful. If Regina suspects you know the truth, she might disappear with Cora before you can stop her. What's the legal process? How do I get Cora away from them? Child Protective Services will need to investigate first. With your evidence, they should be able to get an emergency removal order. But these things take time, and Regina could fight it if she's prepared. I need to move fast." "There's something else you should know. I tracked down Jake Brennan. He's in a group home for traumatized children in Arizona. The foster care system couldn't find a family willing to take him because of his behavioral issues." "What kind of behavioral issues?" "Severe PTSD, attachment disorders, inability to trust adults. According to his caseworker, he still has nightmares about his time with Regina. He was only with her for 18 months, but the psychological damage was extensive." I closed my eyes, thinking about how Regina had been working on Cora for over 2 years now. "Patricia, I'm going to get Cora out of there this week, one way or another. Just be smart about it. This woman is dangerous, and she's already proven she'll kill to protect her secrets." After I hung up, I sat in my hotel room and made a plan. I couldn't wait for the legal system to slowly grind through the process. Every day Cora stayed in that house was another day of psychological damage. Another day Regina was profiting from her exploitation. But I also couldn't just grab Cora and run. That would make me the kidnapper in the eyes of the law, and Regina would use it to paint me as an unstable grandmother trying to steal a child. I needed Regina to make a mistake. I needed her to reveal herself in a way that even Derek couldn't ignore or excuse. The next morning, I returned to the house with a new strategy. It was time to stop pretending I believed their lies. "I've been thinking," I announced at breakfast. "Since I'm planning to move back to Atlanta, I'd like to set up a college fund for Cora, a substantial one." Regina's eyes lit up with greed. "How substantial?" "I was thinking around $200,000 to start." Derek nearly choked on his coffee. "Mom, that's incredibly generous, but she'd need to be enrolled in a real school to be eligible," I continued smoothly. "The fund requires academic transcripts and standardized test scores." Regina's smile faltered. "Well, homeschooling doesn't really work that way." "Oh, but it can. I've done some research. There are state requirements for homeschooled children that include regular testing and documentation. I'd be happy to help Cora get caught up on anything she might have missed." I watched Regina's face cycle through emotions as she calculated the risks and benefits. $200,000 was a lot of money, but it would require proving that Cora was actually receiving an education. "That's very thoughtful," Regina said finally. "But Cora has some special learning needs that make traditional testing inappropriate." "What kind of learning needs?" "She has attention and memory issues related to her trauma. Standard academic evaluation would be overwhelming for her." Another lie. Another excuse to keep Cora isolated and under control. But I had planted the seed I wanted. Regina would spend the day thinking about that money, figuring out how to get her hands on it without exposing the fact that Cora wasn't receiving any real education. And greedy people always make mistakes when they're reaching for a prize just out of their grasp. That evening, I set up the final piece of my trap. It was time to force Regina into revealing exactly who she really was, with witnesses who couldn't be manipulated or silenced. The war was about to end, and Regina had no idea she'd already lost. My plan was simple, but required perfect timing. I called Patricia and asked her to arrange for a social worker to be on standby, then contacted Detective Sarah Morrison from the Atlanta Police Department's Crimes Against Children Unit. I'd done my research carefully. Detective Morrison had a reputation for taking child exploitation cases seriously and acting quickly when presented with solid evidence. Mrs. Chen, these recordings you've described are very concerning, Detective Morrison said during our phone conversation. If you can get this woman to admit on tape that she's been trafficking your granddaughter, we can move immediately. I need to be sure Cora will be safe. If Regina suspects she's about to be exposed, she might hurt her. We'll have units positioned nearby. The moment you signal us, we'll move in. But Mrs. Chen, what you're planning to do is dangerous. This woman has potentially killed before. I'm 62 years old, Detective. I've survived cancer, divorce, bankruptcy, and building a business from nothing. I'm not about to be intimidated by some psychopath who's been torturing my granddaughter. That evening, I put my plan into motion. I returned to Derek's house carrying a briefcase and wearing my most expensive business suit, the one I used to wear when closing major deals in Italy. Derek, Regina, I need to speak with both of you about something important, I announced. It's about Cora's future and the college fund I mentioned. We sat in the living room while Cora was upstairs supposedly doing homework. I opened my briefcase and pulled out official-looking documents I'd had prepared. I've spoken with my financial advisor, and we can actually do much better than $200,000, I began. I'm prepared to establish a trust fund of $500,000 for Cora's education and future. Regina's eyes went wide. Derek looked stunned. Mom, that's incredible. But you don't need to— I want to, I said firmly. But there are conditions, legal conditions that protect both Cora and the money. I spread the documents on the coffee table. The trust requires that Cora be enrolled in an accredited educational program within 30 days. It also requires annual wellness checks by a court-appointed guardian to ensure the funds are being used appropriately. Regina leaned forward, studying the papers. I could see her calculating, trying to find a way around the requirements. What exactly does wellness checks mean? She asked. A social worker would visit annually to assess Cora's living situation, educational progress, and general well-being. Standard procedure for large educational trusts involving minors. That seems rather invasive, Regina said carefully. It's designed to protect children from having their trust funds misused by guardians, I replied, watching her closely. Surely that's not a concern here. Derek was reading through the documents. Mom, this is amazing, but $500,000. How can you afford this? The business in Italy was very profitable. I've decided I want to spend my money on family while I'm still here to see it make a difference. Regina was quiet for a long moment, and I could see the internal struggle playing out on her face. $500,000 was a massive temptation, but the oversight requirements would expose everything she'd been doing. There is one other option, I said casually, as if the idea had just occurred to me. If the educational and oversight requirements are too complicated, I could simply give you the money directly. Cash payment for excellent care of my granddaughter over the years. Regina's head snapped up. Cash payment? Well, you've been providing round-the-clock care for Cora, essentially sacrificing your career to be a full-time mother. That has significant monetary value. I could see the greed lighting up her eyes. Here was a way to get the money without any oversight or requirements. How much were you thinking? Derek asked, though I could tell he was uncomfortable with the idea. I was thinking we could calculate it based on fair market rates. Professional childcare costs about $30 per hour. If we assume 10 hours of active supervision per day for, let's say, the past 2 years, that would be over $200,000 in childcare services. Regina was practically salivating. That's very thoughtful of you to recognize the sacrifice. Of course, I'd want to make sure I understand exactly what services have been provided. For tax purposes, you understand. The IRS requires detailed documentation for large payments like this. I pulled out a small recording device, setting it openly on the coffee table. Would you mind if I record this conversation? My accountant will need a clear record of what the payment is for. Regina hesitated, but the lure of $200,000 in cash won out. Of course. Wonderful. So, Regina, could you describe the care you've been providing for Cora over the past 2 years? Regina launched into what she thought was a glowing description of her mothering. But every word was self-incriminating. I've provided structure and discipline that Cora desperately needed. I've taught her valuable life skills through household responsibilities. I've arranged educational opportunities with other families in our social circle. Educational opportunities? Yes, Cora has learned so much by observing how other households function. I've arranged for her to spend time helping other families with their domestic needs. It's been incredibly valuable for her social development. And these other families compensate you for Cora's time. Well, naturally, they contribute to her upkeep. It costs money to feed and clothe a growing child, and they understand that. Derek was frowning. Regina, what families? I thought you were homeschooling Cora here. Regina shot him an annoyed look. Derek, there are many aspects of Cora's education that you leave to my judgment. You're always so busy with work. How much do these families typically contribute? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. It varies. Anywhere from $50 to $100 per session, depending on the scope of Cora's responsibilities. Sessions? Yes, usually 4 to 6 hour periods where Cora assists with cleaning, organization, childcare support. It's wonderful practical experience for her. Derek was looking increasingly uncomfortable. Regina, are you saying that other families pay you for Cora to work in their houses? It's not work, it's education, Regina snapped. Cora is learning valuable life skills that will serve her well as an adult. I pressed further. And how often do these educational sessions occur? 3 to 4 times per week. Sometimes more if there's high demand. High demand for Cora specifically? Regina's smile was predatory. Cora has developed an excellent reputation among our social circle. She's very obedient and thorough in her tasks. Derek stood up abruptly. Regina, you're talking about sending my daughter to work as a maid for your friends. Don't be ridiculous, Derek. Everything I do is for Cora's benefit. She's learning responsibility and contributing to the household expenses. It's much better than letting her sit around feeling sorry for herself. Contributing to household expenses? Derek's voice was rising. She's 12 years old. Regina's careful facade was beginning to crack. Derek, you have no idea how difficult it's been raising your daughter. She required extensive behavior modification when I came into this family. The structure I've provided has transformed her from a spoiled, destructive child into a productive member of society. Productive? Derek looked sick. You mean profitable. Don't take that tone with me, Regina snarled. I've sacrificed my entire life to fix your broken daughter. The least she can do is contribute to her own upkeep instead of being a constant drain on our resources. The mask was completely off now. The sweet, caring stepmother had vanished, replaced by the cold, calculating predator underneath. I kept the recorder running as Regina continued to rant, each word providing more evidence of child exploitation and abuse. Furthermore, Cora should be grateful for the opportunities I've provided. Do you know how many children would love to have the structure and purpose I've given her? She was headed for juvenile detention or worse before I intervened. By making her scrub floors and work as unpaid labor for your friends, I asked quietly. By teaching her that the world doesn't owe her anything just because her mother died. By showing her that respect and comfort must be earned through hard work and obedience. Derek was staring at his wife like he'd never seen her before. Regina, my God, what have you done? I've saved this family from financial ruin, Regina shouted. Do you think your salary alone could maintain this lifestyle? Do you think money just appears out of nowhere? Cora's contributions have paid for every improvement to this house, every luxury we enjoy. Contributions, I repeated. You mean the money other people pay you for access to my granddaughter. She's not your granddaughter anymore. Regina spun on me, her face twisted with rage. You abandoned this family for 5 years. You don't get to waltz back in here and judge how we've managed without you. I sent $10,000 every month for her care. And every penny went to her care. Food, shelter, clothing, medical expenses, education. Do you have any idea how expensive it is to raise a child properly? Then why does she sleep in a closet-sized room with no belongings while you live in luxury? Because she hasn't earned anything better. Everything in this house belongs to me and Derek. Cora gets exactly what she deserves based on her behavior and contribution. The recording device captured every damning word as Regina revealed her true beliefs about children, money, and exploitation. Finally, I asked the question that would seal her fate. Regina, over the past 2 years, approximately how much money have you received from other families for Cora's educational services? Regina was so angry now that she answered without thinking. Between $15,000 and $20,000, money that was desperately needed to maintain this household and provide for Cora's needs. The room fell silent except for the soft whirring of the recorder. Derek sank back into his chair, his face white. $20,000. You've been selling my daughter's labor and keeping the money. I've been managing this family's finances in ways you're apparently too naive to understand. Regina shot back. Someone had to make hard decisions while you buried your head in the sand. That's when I played my ace. Derek, there's something else you need to know about your wife. I pulled out the newspaper articles Patricia had found about Regina's previous marriages, about Emma Walsh's disappearance, about Thomas Brennan's suspicious death. Regina has done this before, to other children in other families. She's a predator who targets widowed fathers and vulnerable children. Derek read the articles with growing horror while Regina stood frozen, realizing that her past had finally caught up with her. You're lying, she whispered, but there was no conviction in her voice. Emma Walsh is 24 years old now and living in Oregon, I said calmly. She's been in therapy for years dealing with the trauma you inflicted on her. Jake Brennan is in a group home in Arizona because the psychological damage you did to him was so severe that no family would take him. Derek looked up from the articles, his face a mask of disgust and betrayal. You killed Thomas Brennan. That's ridiculous. He fell down the stairs, after you'd been drugging him with sleeping pills, just like you've probably been drugging me. Regina's guilty flinch confirmed his suspicion. Derek stood up slowly, and I could see something fundamental shift in his expression. The man who had been completely under Regina's control was finally seeing her for what she really was. Get out, he said quietly. Derek, you're being manipulated. Get out. His voice exploded through the house. Get out of my house and away from my daughter, you sick, twisted monster. Regina's composure cracked completely. You'll regret this, Derek. Without me, you'll lose everything. Cora will destroy you just like she destroyed Sarah. My wife died in a car accident. Your wife died because she was distracted by that demanding little brat. Cora killed her own mother, and she'll destroy you too if you don't maintain control. The cruelty and manipulation in those words hit Derek like a physical blow. I watched years of psychological manipulation crumble as he finally understood what Regina had been doing to both him and Cora. You have 10 minutes to pack your things and leave, he said, his voice deadly calm. If you're not gone by then, I'm calling the police. But I was already reaching for my phone. Detective Morrison, it's time. Regina's face went white as she realized she'd walked directly into a trap. Within minutes, police cars were pulling into the driveway, and Detective Morrison was placing Regina under arrest for child exploitation and trafficking. As they led her away in handcuffs, she screamed back at the house. You'll never be able to handle her. She's damaged goods. Nobody wants a broken child. But her words bounced harmlessly off the walls of a house where she no longer had any power. The nightmare was finally over. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of my new home in Savannah, Georgia, watching Cora help me prepare Sunday dinner. She was still thin, but her arms no longer bore bruises, and her smile was beginning to return. Real laughter had replaced the careful silence that used to follow her everywhere. Grandma Marcy, did I put enough oregano in the sauce? She asked, stirring the pot with careful concentration. Let me taste it, I said, dipping a spoon into the rich tomato mixture. Perfect. You're becoming quite the chef. Cora beamed with genuine pride, the kind of pride that comes from accomplishment rather than fear-based compliance. It had taken months to help her understand the difference between the two. The legal proceedings had moved swiftly once Detective Morrison had my recordings and Emma Walsh's testimony. Regina was convicted of child trafficking, exploitation, and fraud. She received 15 years in prison with no possibility of parole for 8 years. Her assets were seized to compensate her victims, though Emma, Jake, and Cora would never fully recover from the psychological damage she'd inflicted. Derek had been devastated by the revelations about his wife, but his horror at what had been done to Cora galvanized him into action. He'd voluntarily surrendered custody to me while he underwent therapy to understand how he'd been so completely manipulated. Our relationship was still fragile, but he was working to rebuild trust with his daughter. "She sends me letters," Cora had told me last month, referring to Regina. "They get delivered to Derek's house sometimes. What do they say? That she misses me, that she's sorry, that if I could just visit her once, she could explain everything." Cora looked at me with eyes that were learning to see clearly again. "Derek tears them up without reading them to me now. He says she doesn't get to hurt me anymore." The healing process hadn't been easy. Cora arrived at my house with almost no possessions, except the clothes she'd been wearing, and a small box of mementos her mother had left her, items Regina had hidden away and Derek found while cleaning out the house. That first night, Cora had stood in the doorway of the bedroom I'd prepared for her, staring at the bookshelf full of age-appropriate books, the comfortable reading chair, the desk where she could do homework. "Is this really mine?" she'd asked. "Every single thing in this room belongs to you," I'd told her. "And you never have to earn it or lose it based on your behavior. It's yours because you're my granddaughter and I love you." She'd cried then, deep sobs that seemed to come from years of stored-up grief and confusion. I'd held her while she grieved for the mother she'd lost, for the childhood that had been stolen from her, for the safety she'd never really felt until that moment. The first few weeks were the hardest. Cora would wake up every morning and immediately start looking for chores to do, panicking if she couldn't find ways to make herself useful. "What should I clean today?" she'd ask anxiously. "What work do you need me to do?" "Sweetheart, your only job is to be a child, to go to school, make friends, play, read, discover what you enjoy doing." It took months for her to truly believe that love wasn't contingent on performance. School had been another challenge. Cora was academically behind her peers, but more concerning was her social anxiety. She didn't know how to interact with children her own age, how to play, how to just be a kid. Her teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, had been incredibly patient and understanding. "Cora is clearly intelligent," she'd told me during our first conference. "She just needs time to learn that it's safe to be curious, to make mistakes, to ask questions." Slowly, very slowly, Cora began to emerge from the shell Regina had built around her. She discovered that she loved reading fantasy novels, that she was naturally gifted at art, and that she had a wonderful sense of humor when she felt safe enough to let it show. The money Regina had stolen was never fully recovered, but I didn't care. I had enough saved from my business ventures to provide comfortably for both Cora and myself. More importantly, I had my granddaughter back. Derek visited every other weekend now, working to rebuild the relationship with his daughter that Regina had systematically poisoned. The visits were still somewhat awkward, but progress was being made. "I'm sorry I didn't protect you," he'd told Cora during one of his early visits. "I should have seen what was happening. I should have listened when you tried to tell me." Regina was very good at making people believe her, Cora had replied with wisdom beyond her 13 years. "She fooled a lot of adults. The therapist we'd been working with, Dr. Sarah Chen, had helped Cora understand that the abuse wasn't her fault, that she wasn't broken or damaged, that she deserved love and safety just like any other child. Cora has remarkable resilience, Dr. Chen had told me privately. The fact that she retained her core sense of self despite years of psychological manipulation is extraordinary. She's going to be just fine." Today, as we finished preparing dinner, I watched Cora set the table with the careful attention to detail that had once been forced upon her, but now came from genuine pride in contributing to our household. The difference was that she chose to help because she wanted to, not because she was afraid of what would happen if she didn't. "Grandma Marcy," she said as we sat down to eat, "can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart. Do you think my mom would be proud of who I'm becoming?" The question caught me off guard, but I knew exactly how to answer it. "Cora, Your mother loved you more than anything in the world. She would be incredibly proud of your strength, your kindness, and your courage. But most of all, she'd be proud that you never gave up hope." Cora smiled, and for just a moment, I saw her mother's radiant joy shining through her features. After dinner, we settled into our evening routine. Cora curled up in the living room with one of her beloved fantasy novels while I worked on a crossword puzzle. The quiet companionship felt like the most natural thing in the world. "Grandma Marcy? Yes? I'm glad you came home from Italy." "So am I, sweetheart. So am I." As bedtime approached, Cora gathered her book and started toward her room, then paused. "I love you," she said simply. "I love you too, Cora. More than you'll ever know." After she went to bed, I sat in my favorite chair and reflected on the journey that had brought us here. The woman who had once seemed so loving and devoted had nearly destroyed my granddaughter's spirit. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated the power of genuine love and a grandmother's determination. I thought about the money I'd sent over those 5 years, money that was supposed to provide for Cora's care and education. In the end, those monthly payments of $10,000 had bought something far more valuable than Regina's luxurious lifestyle. They'd bought me the motivation to investigate when something felt wrong, the resources to fight for my granddaughter, and the evidence I needed to expose the truth. Regina was now serving her sentence in a federal prison, where she would hopefully never again have the opportunity to exploit vulnerable children. Emma Walsh had started a nonprofit organization to help other victims of family trafficking, turning her trauma into a force for good. Jake Brennan was slowly learning to trust again in a specialized therapeutic foster home. And Cora was becoming the bright, curious, confident young woman she was always meant to be. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Derek. "Hi, Mom. How's everything going?" "Good. Cora made spaghetti sauce today. She's quite proud of it." "That's wonderful. Mom, I wanted to tell you something." "What's that?" "I've been thinking about what you said months ago, about how Regina targeted me because I was vulnerable and had assets. I've decided to donate the house." I was surprised. "Derek, that's a big decision. I can't live there anymore. Every room reminds me of what I allowed to happen to my daughter. I'm donating it to a foundation that helps children who've been trafficked or exploited. At least some good will come from that place." "I think that's a wonderful idea." "And Mom? Thank you for never giving up on Cora, for fighting for her when I was too blind to see what was happening. She's my granddaughter, Derek. I would have moved heaven and earth to protect her." After I hung up, I walked quietly down the hall to check on Cora. She was sound asleep, her book still open beside her, her breathing deep and peaceful. This was how a child should sleep, safely, securely, without fear of what tomorrow might bring. I tucked the covers around her shoulders and kissed her forehead gently. "Sweet dreams, my darling girl," I whispered. "You're safe now. You're home." As I turned off the light and closed her door, I realized that this wasn't just about saving Cora from Regina's abuse. It was about reclaiming what family really means. Not the performance and manipulation that Regina had orchestrated, but genuine love, protection, and the kind of safety that allows a child to grow into who they're meant to become. The inheritance Regina had stolen wasn't just money. It was Cora's childhood, her sense of self-worth, her ability to trust. But inheritances can be rebuilt, and love is the most powerful foundation of all. Standing in the hallway of our peaceful home, listening to the gentle sounds of a child sleeping without fear, I knew we had won something far more valuable than any amount of money. We had won back our family, the war was over, and love had triumphed. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.